Poor black waitress helped an old man in the rain, but what followed the next morning shattered her world. Denise Carter walked into work soaked and 5 minutes late, only to be fired in front of a crowd that watched in silence. She had no idea the stranger she saved that night was watching, too. And the moment he stepped through that diner door, every cruel word her manager said would come back to haunt him. Before we go any further, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Now let's begin. But then she saw it. A black luxury sedan parked crooked on the roadside, hazard lights blinking weakly through the downpour. The hood was up, steam curling like desperate smoke into the night. Through her headlights, she saw him, an elderly white man, coat-soaked, one hand resting on the fender for balance. No umbrella, no help. Just a tired, drenched face staring into the storm. Her mind hesitated. Nights like this taught people to mind their own business. But she noticed the way his shoulders shook, the trembling of his hands trying to hold a phone that clearly had no signal. Denise sighed, pulled over, and rolled down her window halfway. The smell of wet asphalt and engine oil filled the cab. "You okay out here?" Her voice cut through the roar of rain. The man squinted, startled. "My car, it's dead. No tow trucks answering. I think I took a wrong turn." Without another word, Denise unlocked the passenger door and leaned toward him. "You'll freeze out here. Get in before you drown." He hesitated. A stranger offering help on an empty road. Then he nodded, opened the door, and slid inside, dripping water onto the worn seat. The heater barely worked, but she cranked it anyway. Its low hum filled the silence as they drove off slowly. "You didn't have to stop," he murmured, voice quiet but grateful. "I guess I did," Denise replied, shrugging. "Can't leave someone's granddad melting in the rain." A faint laugh escaped him. He introduced himself as Henry Weston, explaining he'd been driving back from a late meeting outside the city when the storm caught him, and his car had given up midway. Denise listened, but she didn't pry. She just drove, headlights sweeping over wet trees, the rhythm of rain heavy on the roof. She took him to her neighborhood, a line of narrow apartment blocks dimly lit by flickering streetlights. Inside her small one-room flat, she handed him a towel and a warm cup of instant soup. The radiator clicked weakly. She offered him her only blanket, ignoring his protests. When he finally drifted off on her couch, Denise sat quietly by the window. Watching the rain slow to a drizzle, her reflection looked tired, but at peace. She had done the right thing. Before dawn, she left for work. The couch was empty, the blanket folded neatly, and a small note rested on the table. "Thank you for seeing me as a person." She folded it into her pocket, smiled faintly, and stepped back into the gray morning. She didn't know yet that the man she helped would walk back into her life, and when he did, nothing would ever be the same. The morning dragged cold and gray. Denise's shoes squeaked on the diner floor as she rushed in, 10 minutes late. Her hair was still damp, her breath quick from sprinting up the hill. The smell of frying bacon and cheap coffee hit her like a wall. Behind the counter, Steve Harlow was already barking orders, voice sharp enough for everyone to hear. "Carter, you think time bends for you?" His tone dripped contempt. Denise caught her breath. "I'm sorry, sir." "Save it!" he snapped, slamming a receipt pad onto the counter. "Packed morning. Owners visiting. And you stroll in like you're doing us a favor." A few customers turned their heads. The young cook froze over the grill. The clatter of dishes quieted. The tension in the room was thick enough to taste. "I had to help someone," Denise said gently, calmly. "An older man broke down in the storm. Good deeds don't pay rent." Steve cut her off with a wave. "You're late. That's all that matters." He turned to the crowd, voice rising. "If any of you want to show up late too, maybe you can follow her out the door." A few chuckles escaped, some people looked away. Denise's chest tightened. "Please, Mr. Harlow, I've worked here 4 years. You know I don't—" He pointed to the door. "You're done. Hand over your apron. I don't need excuses. I need reliability." Silence fell. Even the fryer seemed to stop bubbling. Denise untied her apron, hands trembling, jaw tight. She laid it carefully on the counter, refusing to let him see her break. As she turned toward the door, a woman in a booth whispered to her friend, "That poor thing. She's the nicest one here. Denise walked into the drizzle. The bell above the door jingled one last time. Rain had softened now, but it stung more than last night. She paused at the corner, reflection faint in a puddle at her feet. She had done the right thing. And then she noticed it, a black sedan slowly rolling past the diner, tinted window lowering just slightly. Inside, Henry Weston watched her walk away, face unreadable. The same note she had given him rested on the passenger seat. He adjusted his tie, glanced back at the diner sign flickering in the rain, and murmured to himself, "So, this is where she works." He stepped on the gas. What happened next would change both of their lives forever. By noon, the diner buzzed with energy. Rain had stopped, sunlight spilling through the windows. The smell of coffee and fresh pie filled the air. Steve Harlow stood by the counter, straightening napkin holders for the 5th time, nerves hidden behind a mask of fake confidence. The staff whispered. Nobody had ever met the elusive owner. Today was the day. At exactly 12:30, the door opened. The bell chimed once. A tall, silver-haired man stepped inside, dressed in a dark tailored coat and polished shoes. His presence was calm but commanding, the kind that made people straighten involuntarily. The cook froze mid-turn at the grill. A waitress paused, coffee pot in hand. Steve hurried forward with a salesman's smile plastered on his face. "Mr. Weston, welcome, sir," he said, voice high with forced warmth. "Everything is running perfectly clean and efficient, just like you'd want." Weston scanned the diner, eyes moving over booths. Counter, polished chrome, staff trying not to stare. Then he saw the empty corner where Denise had worked. His jaw tightened. "Where's the young woman from last night?" he asked evenly. Steve blinked. I'm sorry, sir. Denise Carter?" Weston repeated calmly. "The waitress who worked here yesterday morning." Steve forced a laugh. "Oh, her. I had to let her go. Always late. Poor attitude. Not the kind of image you want for business." Weston's expression didn't change. Silence cut through the chatter like a blade. He turned to the cook. "Is that true?" The cook looked at his shoes. "No, sir, Denise. She was the best we had." Steve's smile faltered. "People exaggerate. I run a tight ship here." Weston stepped closer. "You fired her this morning?" "Yes, sir." "For cause." Weston nodded slowly. Then he said, low but commanding, "Call her back." Immediately, the color drained from Steve's face. "Sir, that won't be necessary. Call her back," Weston repeated, voice cutting through the room. 5 minutes later, the bell above the door chimed again. Denise stepped inside, wrinkled uniform, confusion etched on her face. Every head turned. Weston's eyes softened. "Miss Carter, you helped me last night when no one else would. You didn't know who I was. You didn't care. You just saw a person in need." Whispers rippled through the diner. The cook dropped his spatula. The waitress gasped. "You showed me what this place should represent," Weston continued. "So I'm making it official. Denise Carter is reinstated as co-manager, effective immediately." Steve's jaw dropped. "You can't be serious." "I am very serious," Weston interrupted. "You wanted to impress me. Mr. Harlow, congratulations, you just did it the wrong way." The staff clapped quietly, relief flooding the room. Denise stood speechless, tears brimming. Weston smiled faintly. "You gave me kindness in the rain. I intend to return it with respect." The weeks that followed, the diner began to breathe life again. Mornings buzzed with regulars, the smell of coffee mingling with laughter and fresh pie. Under Denise's quiet but firm guidance, everything ran smoother than ever. Tips increased. Customers lingered longer. Weston's visits became less about oversight and more about quiet pride. But not everyone shared that pride. Steve Harlow's forced smile had gone hollow. He now worked the register, no longer the boss, just another employee answering to the woman he had humiliated. Each time Denise passed him, polite and composed, a shadow of resentment lingered behind his calm exterior. After hours, he would pace the kitchen, muttering to himself, the weight of his failure pressing on him. Then came the missing cash. At first, small amounts, 50 here, 70 there. Denise noticed during a late-night count. She double-checked, triple-checked. No mistakes. She didn't accuse anyone. But the sinking feeling in her gut told her it was deliberate. When it happened again, she went straight to Weston. "I've balanced every register myself," she said. "Someone's trying to make it look like I'm stealing." Weston studied her, nodding. Do you have any guesses? None I can prove, she admitted. Then he acted. Hidden cameras were installed near the counters, and Weston quietly brought in a man in plain clothes, a private investigator. Only Denise and Weston knew. Days passed. Denise worked as usual, smiling through the tension. Steve lingered too long near the drawer she used. And then on a rainy Tuesday night, the camera caught it. Steve waited until Denise left early for a delivery. He opened her register, pulled out a stack of bills, and replaced her count slip with his own. He even smiled, whispering, "Let's see you talk your way out of this." The next morning, Weston called a full staff meeting. Everyone gathered around the counter, confused. The investigator placed a laptop on the table and pressed play. The footage rolled. Silence. Brutal silence. Steve's hand, the money, the smirk, everything laid bare. He went pale. "That's edited," he shouted. "She's setting me up." Denise didn't move. Weston's voice was calm but ice cold. "You framed the one person who saved me. You tried to ruin her reputation in my business. I built this place on trust, and you made it rot." Two officers quietly stepped in. Handcuffs clicked. Steve shouted curses as they led him away, but no one looked up. The diner remained eerily quiet that day. Denise worked her shift as usual, polite but distant. That night, Weston approached. "You handled it with grace," he said softly. "Most people would have screamed." Denise smiled faintly. "I learned something that night in the rain," she said. "Some storms you stand through. Others pass on their own." The neon sign flickered against the wet glass outside. This time, its reflection looked cleaner. 6 months later, the diner looked nothing like the one Denise had been fired from. Windows gleamed. The new sign above the door read, "Rainy Day Diner." Every seat was filled. People came not just for the food, but for the story. The story of a waitress who helped a stranger and changed both their lives. Inside, the air was warm, filled with laughter and the aroma of fresh coffee. Denise moved gracefully through the room, clipboard in hand, smiling at everyone she passed. Staff worked smoothly under her direction, proud to be part of something built on respect instead of fear. Weston sat in his usual corner booth, quietly watching her. Months ago, the press had called her the heart behind the diner's rebirth. When a local reporter asked why he had given her half ownership, he simply said, "She gave me kindness when she had nothing. That's worth more than profit." That night, he stood and called for everyone's attention. "We built this place on compassion," he said. Denise reminded us what that means. "Today, I'm making it official. She's not just co-manager anymore. She's my partner." The staff broke into applause. Denise covered her face for a moment, overwhelmed. Weston handed her an envelope, legal papers confirming full partnership. "You've earned every bit of this," he said. Later, after the lights dimmed and the last customers left, Denise stepped outside for air. Across the street, under the neon glow of a car wash sign, a familiar figure scrubbed a windshield. Steve Harlow, shoulders hunched, uniform damp from the mist. For a long moment, she simply watched. Then she walked across the street, calm and composed. Steve froze as she stopped beside him. Without a word, she handed him a sealed envelope. "What's this?" he asked, voice low. "Your name's on it," she replied. "Open it when you're ready." She turned and walked away. Steve finally tore it open. Inside was a check made out to a local charity, along with a donation receipt in his name. Beneath it, a handwritten note. "Everyone deserves a second chance. I had mine." Back at the diner, Denise flipped the sign from closed to open. Morning light crept through the glass, reflecting off the polished counter. She tied her apron, calm and confident. The first customer walked in, shaking off rain from his coat. Denise smiled softly. "Morning," she said. "Welcome to Rainy Day Diner, where kindness isn't just served, it's celebrated."